SOVLAB has this laboratory, and like our organization and our hosts. We have quite long partnership in different dimensions, and so I was offered to somehow present some part of our digital archive here in Framoses Festival, and of course it was a great opportunity and pleasure to do it, to be included in such interesting environment and program. And now I'll try briefly speak about the background of our organization and initiative, like a digital archive, and also to speak specifically about the one and like a few of very interesting and valuable collection, like a video archive we were able to find and incorporate and digitize, and then now we are working to publish them on web platform and somehow trigger society to think about how to preserve visual and same time like a visual heritage and historical documentary visual heritage of our society and country. So briefly about SOVLAB, it's a local-based civil society group which was founded in 2010 around a concrete idea to share all experience of modern research and analysis of recent past, especially the legacy of the totalitarian rule, which was here after the Soviet Russian occupation of 1921 until the 1991, when Soviet Union collapsed and Georgia established the independence. And we started like some non-formal group organized around this idea to deal with this past. And step by step, our organization evolved like an institution which trying to operate on a collective memory field. And unfortunately, according some challenges our state experienced it in 1990s and 2000, and until today there is quite big vacuum on this field, collective memory and the policy of memory policy, we can say. And we are trying to compensate this vacuum, and we are in reality doing the same job which is done in Central and Eastern European spaces, former post-totalitarian spaces, by state institutions like National Institute of Memory or scientific institutions, or like some hybrid dimension of kind of this structure. And still, like a SOVLAB stays as a civil society organization with quite limited human and financial resources, but anyway, permanently since 2010 we continue, and we are focusing about the recent past of Georgia from the middle of 19th century, we can say, until the 1990s, and from the beginning, like understanding that all state archives are almost like a direct product of this Russian occupation and the totalitarian rules. They preserve a lot of materials, but they are a result of this official frame, like a state institution and Soviet state institution, and like a sources which we are okay in frame of the ideology and the system, like a huge spectrum of the sources, materials, different dimensions of the materials, like papers, documents, photo materials, and cinema and audio materials. We are just, I'd say, still staying in the private spaces. And since 2010, we organized around the idea of the public archive to collect all these alternative sources, we can say, from families. Like each of the family contain some part of the documentary sources which is still understood as a part of the private memory of this family along of 20th century or 19th century, and it's valuable only for this family, very micro level memory, but in reality now they might be considered as a unique sources to understand the real face, real structure, real dimension of our society during the last centuries. And step by step we started to collect such family archives, collections, and of course from the initial step we were just dreaming. Of course it's 2010 and the digital technologies are not so as today developed, and of course our resources were quite limited at the time, and still we are saying that they are quite limited even today. But when we were discussing the idea of this open digital web archive, of course some theoretic frame to include the video materials or the cinema materials also was part of it. So, and during this last 13 years, of course, we were lucky to identify and just collect some very unique pieces of this visual heritage, we can say, which were still in private spaces. And I will just speak about only two of them, which are quite recent. And you see some small selection of some very key events from these two very rich video archive, and I'll try to explain the origin of those archives. So it's mostly about the end of the 1980s and the beginning of 1990s. It's called like a transition time according to the trend of the Central and the Eastern European spaces, as the totalitarian regimes are collapsing and society is struggling for independence, and then it's a time to reestablish a democratic statehood, and all this transition is going mostly smoothly. So it is called like a velvet revolutions in former DDR and like Poland, Hungary, etc., etc. But it was not same here. So in the initial step, of course, there was quite big similarities of this mass protest and anti-totalitarian system movements, like in Central and Eastern Europe, here in Georgia, and like in Baltic states and Ukraine, even in Russia. But step by step, they just turned in very quite complex and tragic dimension, and it's a time when official totalitarian rule is collapsing, it's exhausted, and there is absolutely like they reach the limit to hold the control of all areas of the state and the society's life, and of course it's also just influences the control of the visual, not art, but like a journalist, and making some documentaries, and before as technologies were monopolized by the state, and only on the private spaces some also quite privileged part of the society has like a possibility to own these small cameras, or like to fix something very private on the 8mm film or 16mm, etc., etc. But at the end of the 1980s, is maybe many of you who either remember or knows this video technique, like VHS tapes, and the camera started to be a little bit more accessible. But not so on a mass level here. But it's a time when we have this collapse of the totalitarian regimes. They are not able to control everything around, and the streets are like a space of direct political events, and also representatives of these mass political movements understand the importance and the meaning of fixing this history, like this ongoing history. They understand themselves as a part of this crucial changes and stress for changes and the independence, and they also need to fix it, to preserve it for the next generations. But it stands a little bit on the background. But the real need is to just fix the reality, to document these processes and these events. And in Georgian dimension, it was mostly also backed by the experience of the great tragedy of 1989, 9 of April, when a huge mass protest, peaceful demonstration was brutally suppressed in the center of Tbilisi on Rustaveli Avenue. And when this tragedy happened, or next months and even years, there was a struggle of the society here to prove that it was a crime. So, like a center, Moscow, and its internal army forces and state security and army suppressed the peaceful demonstration. And there was a quite a big need of the evidences that chemical weapon was used and the peaceful demonstrants were injured, etc., etc. And few cameras were on the scene, video cameras were filming this situation, and those records next month and next year just was used as a direct proofs. And based on that experience, of course, the leaders of the mass protest movements were motivated to incorporate the volunteers or already experienced cameramen to film everything around, to document this reality, to use and to have it like documentary proofs. And its origin of the archive you see on screen. And they just managed to, and I know it from the former owner of this video archive, we managed to identify, and then now it's digitized, and we're working to publish it completely on our webpage, archive.g. So as the cameraman told us the stories, the leaders of the National Democratic Party gathered money and find someone who was already experienced in the underground trade under the Soviet dimension and was linked with the contrabanda lines, and now it was much more free situation in 1989. And they brought this Japanese video camera, and it was transported to Koti seaport, and then they just brought it and gave to the cameraman, who was already quite actively involved in this mass protest movement before, and the task was to film everything around what was possible. And of course, filming everything was quite difficult because the state or country or city Tbilisi was just like a volcano. Every day something was happening, some mass demonstrations or some encounter with the local communist forces, etc., etc. And of course in 1989 some another trap started, also manipulated from side of the center, Moscow, and you see right now on that screen events of July 1989, when these first clashes between the Abkhaz minority and the Georgians started in Sukhumi, and it was one of the first open and violent explosion of this ethnic tension, which was strongly influenced and manipulated by the policy from side of Moscow to just use this tension to prevent the development of the national movements here in South Caucasus and in Georgia. And it's filmed, and the agenda is quite clear to just fix everything as a document. And this archive was still under this private ownership of the person who was filming all those events, and quite difficult because the camera was already modern and suitable, but like VHS tapes were quite difficult to collect that amount which was necessary to film everything around. And sometimes when we are digitizing this material, you see that those are tapes of some movies, like either illegally or legally transported from West to the Soviet Union, and sometimes some part of this 80s pop culture records or the movies are there, and then it's overlapped by this documentary scenes. And in 1990s, after all these troubles and tragedies and collapse and the wars and this huge tragedy our society experienced, and it's now in popular culture and language is called like a dark and sweet 1990s. The owner of this archive was thinking what to do, and was holding this small, but in reality quite materials. It's up to 50 hours separated on approximately 20 VHS tape, and just no one was interested in. And we knew about that person and like this archive from representative of this dissident and then mass protest movement, Tamar Chaidze, whom I interviewed in frame of our permanent activity to record the witnesses, to collect the oral histories. Since 2010 we are doing it on a permanent basis, and we already have some approximately 250, maximum 300 records of a variety of people who are the witnesses of the Soviet totalitarian rule and the end of the Soviet totalitarian system. And when I was recording Tamar Chaidze, she mentioned that there was a cameraman who was filming everything around we were doing at that time, and I don't know is he still alive or not, but if you just check and find him, maybe he still owns some interesting materials. So it happened in 2021. And then I started to check the identity of the person. She just named, and finally when I just checked the place where he lived, this building was destroyed, and all people who lived inside were just moved somewhere else. So, and it was almost end of the story. The person you were looking for, you know the address, but the building is already disappeared. And then I continued to think about the possibilities, and finally I found the son of him on Facebook platform, and communicated with the son, and he gave the phone of our cameraman, and then this communication was also delayed because of the current year's March mass demonstrations and all this troubles and brutality we came across. And after all this trouble, I called him, and he was too excited that someone found him and was interested in his video archive. And then there was a series of the negotiations, we can say, during the end of the spring and during the current summer to agree about the price is, in one hand, he was motivated to, I would say, preserve this collection and to, let's say, not to let someone to transfer it outside of Georgia, and he completely understands that it's a part of the collective, like a historical heritage, but he is the owner, he filmed it. He risked the life several times while filming all this material. He rejected the several candidates who were just directly paying the money. He was insisting, but they were just motivated to transport these materials outside of Georgia in different other archives. And for us it was quite depressing in one hand, because we are not so sure that such amount of the money was easy to find and collect. But anyway, he agreed. The proposes like that even 1 year, if you will collect such money, I will just guarantee you that I will wait. And then in summer, in July, we started the civil campaign of crowdfunding, asking to our audience and citizens that such unique collection of the documentary records of 1989-1991 exists, and there's a price and we should buy it, but we are not able to pay such money. And in reality, including me, no one of us was too optimistic that we will be able to collect this money during the 1 year. But somehow it's appeared that our call was too successful, and in reality we collected from like a society using this crowdfunding, direct crowdfunding, almost during the 2-3 weeks. And some small remaining part was funded by the Open Society Foundation Georgia. And then finally we were able to buy this unique collection and transported it to our working space, and started to digitize all those records. And now it's a time to edit them and to upload them on our archives YouTube channel, and then on our archive directly archive.g. So it's a story of the one of the most interesting and valuable collection we own, and we are just on one hand, of course, motivated and also obliged to share it to the public and say that it's a public property and everyone is able to use those materials for the education and scientific purposes. And another one of the most interesting and rich collection we owned, it's also by the private individual, Tsitso Grigoria, who was also very actively involved in this mass protest movement. Her husband was like a leader of one small party at the end of the 1980s, and then they were in coalition with the Georgian and its party, and they shared the like this very tragic fortune after the military coup in Tbilisi, when Gamsapurdia was forced to leave and also all his supporters were suppressed. And before this military overtook of power from 1989 until 1991, end of 1991, Tsitso was also filming everything around. And it's a much more bigger archive and very interesting one. And she and her daughter, Tsira Elisashvili, are contributing on this like a volunteer basis, and we are finalizing now to digitize also the second very unique documentary video archive. And it's very kind of not funny but interesting when you have now the specter of the different perspectives. As I already mentioned, Tsitso was on part of this movement around the Gamsapurdia, and Vakhtang, from whom we brought this another archive, was was close to the leadership of that time opposition movement, National Democratic Party, and they worked in the same time, same area on the different sites, we can say. And even when I was preparing these small cuts for screening here, and was choosing some interesting scenes, it was funny that just I identified the situation as the same event in Rustaveli Avenue, which was filmed by those two cameramen and camerawomen from the different points. It's about one of the leaders of this protest movement, Irakli Khvadagiani, who was in confrontation with the Gamsafurdia, is coming in the center of Rustaveli Avenue during this mass demonstration to negotiate. And so camera follows him, and another camera is standing in like a center of Islam support. Yeah. And when I was just looking through that video from the side of the Gamsapurdia, I just realized that I also know what's happening in the middle of the crowd, because this record was digitized before I just digitized this event. So it's one of the examples how it's getting possible to reconstruct reality based on those documentary records, and it's very specific because if we compare the challenge of the historians regarding to reconstruct the reality of the beginning of the 20th century or the middle of the 20th century or the late Soviet time, mostly it's is basing on the documentary sources like papers, and also sometimes we have the luck and the possibility to find some directly witnesses who can explain the what is standing behind these texts. But about the collapse of Soviet Union and all those events we already marked, it's getting more and more difficult and challenging to work and analyze those events based on the archival sources, like text materials, because it's a time when all this centralized and like a bureaucratic monster, Soviet Union is collapsing, and Communist Party is collapsing, and paperwork is just finishing, and everything is happening like in the streets. Even making some very crucial decision, it's on the personal basis, in face-to-face situation, in middle of the street, and you don't have the text materials. And the documentation is that one. So if it fixes on camera, and of course, as I already mentioned at the beginning of this small talk, that the like a idea and agenda to include and incorporate the camera persons was to document the situation, to have it like a proof. And now it's a challenge to find, to identify more and more movements, just how to say, collect this data, digitize, and also just make it like open sources.